Did you know that anyone with access to your data could open up your organization to more vulnerabilities? At SideChannel, we merge deep expertise with our innovative software product to ensure that critical data is secure. Vendor lists grow, but your organization's cyber risk level doesn't have to. Learn more about our risk management services at sidechannel.com.
Hi, everyone. This is Gary Berman, host of the Cyber Hero Adventure Show. We have a very special guest today, Michael Daniel, who's the president and CEO of the Cyber Threat Alliance. Hey, Michael, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thanks for having me on.
Indeed. And one of the things that we were talking about just before I hit the recording button is your passion for martial arts. Before we get into the cybersecurity applications of that, which there must be, maybe you can share with our audience a little bit about your passion and your history, in that. Would that be okay?
Oh, sure. I mean, part of the reason that I got involved with studying martial arts is that when I moved to Washington, D.C., and I started an office job, I realized that I was not getting the level of physical activity that I needed. And there was a guy down the hall who had gone to graduate school, who said, "Hey, I'm going to this martial arts dojo. You want to give it a try?" And I was like, "Sure." And so, I just started going with him and really enjoyed it, and have been studying, ever since. And I mean, it's a great sort of stress reliever. It's completely different than what I do all day, behind a computer keyboard or whatever. And so it's a great sort of counterpoint to what I do as my professional life. And so it's really quite a lot of fun, and I've always gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it.
One of the interesting things that you're saying, besides what popped in my brain, is you could use those skills in the work of cybersecurity, for sure, offense and defense and those kinds of things. But something else that's just kind of popping to my mind is this whole notion of well-being in the cybersecurity ecosystem, mental health, the challenges associated with sitting in front of a computer. Maybe you can share with our audience a little bit about your experience, in that world, what you've seen from your purview in your role at CTA.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's really interesting about the cybersecurity community is we do have a portion of it, right, that does incident response. And they're very overtaxed, right? When you're doing the incident response kind of work, you're always on call. You never know when it's going to happen, except that it's most likely to happen late on a Friday afternoon, particularly if it's right before a holiday weekend, right? That's, we say that with a joke, but it's actually not a joke, right?
Right.
That's when a lot of those incidents happen. If you're in the government, and like I was for many years, and you're dealing with those kinds of incidents, and that's very taxing, right? That's very hard on families. That's very hard on people. And that's why we get the level of burnout in that sector of the community. Now, of course, not all of the community has, those issues. And if you're doing other kinds of work, it might be less stressful, but I think, or at least sort of immediately demanding. But I think one of the challenges that we have in cybersecurity, right, is that that there's a lot of uncertainty. And your work is never really done, right? Because the bad guys are always going to keep trying. And so you need to have that balance, and you need to be able to step away from the computer screen, and you need to be able to, focus on something else. And I would say that's true for almost any job that you do, right? But it's definitely true for cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's great advice, which I hope our audience will heed right away. And I mentioned to you earlier, I'm going to go down to the treadmill, at least I can walk, on a treadmill, or, or do some exercise. So, now focusing, further on your mission, for those of our audience who may not understand CTA's mission and how you go about doing it, why don't you describe what you're doing and why?
Sure. So the Cyber Threat Alliance is a nonprofit, and we are a membership association. So cybersecurity companies join CTA, and they agree to share a certain amount of cyber threat intelligence technical cyber threat intelligence with each other. And what they share goes into a platform, and then all the other members can take that information and bring it back and use it in their products or services to make their products and services more effective. We enable sharing both in an automated fashion and in a human-to-human fashion among our member companies. And so really our mission is to enable our members to do a better job at what they do, but also to assist in the disruption of what the bad guys are doing and to raise the level of cybersecurity across the digital ecosystem. So that's really our mission. We have about 36 member companies from headquartered in 11 countries around the world. About half are based here in the US and about half are based overseas.
So one of the interesting things that you said is this notion of sharing, and maybe you can correct the following if my assumption is incorrect, but my observation from listening and learning to subject matter experts like you is that the criminals are more like horizontally structured. If you think of a matrix, you know, and that they share information really pretty freely to help one another, where the defenders are more vertically structured, constrained by competition, intellectual property, rules and regulations, policies, economic considerations, and things like that. Is that a valid sort of assessment from your perch?
Well, I think there are a number of things that that I've learned about information sharing in the time running CTA for about the last 6 years or so. My standing joke is that, you know, there's a reason why we talked about information sharing for so long instead of doing it, is because it turns out doing it's actually really hard. And so, I mean, you're right. There's all sorts of reasons that sort of impede that information flow. Some of them is, I mean, some of it just is that, you know, what kind of information are you talking about? You know, is it the technical data? Well, if it's the technical side of things, actually the number of entities that can really produce and consume highly technical data is actually pretty limited. And so a lot of the entities aren't able to do that. They don't know what an indicator of compromise is. And frankly, we really actually shouldn't expect them to, because that's not their core business, right? There are definitely, you know, issues that, depending on exactly what kind of information you're talking about, you do eventually run into some privacy concerns. And then you just also run into scale issues, particularly here in the United States, right? Like, I mean, we have something on the order of 13,000 financial services companies.
Wow.
I mean, that's a big number, right? And a lot of those are very small. A lot of them are community banks, right? And so it's a very difficult challenge to get the information that we want to get it out to all the right parts of the ecosystem in a timely manner. And so this is a really hard problem.
Indeed. And so how does CTA facilitate that? You know, are there requirements or incentives for people to kind of play nice with each other and share?
Well, so one of our business rules is that if you're part of CTA, you must share. So we have a sharing algorithm. We have an algorithm that actually evaluates the incoming threat intelligence and assigns a point value to it. And one of our rules is that you must submit a certain number of points worth of intelligence every week in order to stay in good standing, in order to actually retain your access to the shared data. So, and we did that because we didn't want any free riders inside CTA, because this is everybody's core business, right? And so we couldn't afford to have free riders in CTA and trying to take advantage of the system, because that would not have been sustainable. From my point of view, what the niche that CTA is trying to serve is to serve the cybersecurity providers. Our members are companies like Palo Alto Networks or Cisco or Sophos or McAfee or BlueLive or, Dragos. I mean, I could go through the whole list, but those are the ones that are providing cybersecurity services to others, as opposed to hospitals or banks or energy companies or things like that.
I see.
That's not my, if a large enterprise showed up and said, we can pay your membership fee and we can meet your contribution requirements, we would look at taking them, but that's not my target. That's not my target audience. And the idea behind it is that we want to enable the cybersecurity providers to be sharing the technical data, the highly technical data that they can use, that they can produce and consume, have them share it in the background, and then make everybody else who uses their products and services better off, because that sharing is happening in the background. So that, everyone's products and services are better. And so then you raise the level of cybersecurity across the ecosystem because of that. You also, at the same time, I think we could enable other types of sharing organizations to focus less on the highly technical data and more on the things that are highly relevant to that industry, right? So that the financial services ISAC or the energy ISAC doesn't have to spend quite as much effort trying to get all the technical data of the, file hashes and URLs and all that sort of thing, and can really focus on the things that actually really matter to that industry of, okay, how is the threat landscape changing? What do financial services companies need to do differently today than they were doing yesterday because something has changed in the landscape? Here's what's new for you. And we definitely want to be a force multiplier in that way.
Indeed. And so you mentioned several of the ISACs. In my journey into cybersecurity, the ISACs I thought were a reasonable solution to this matrix kind of thing, that I was describing. So what is the nature of the relationships with CTA and ISACs? I mean, I would imagine, you collaborate or cooperate.
Absolutely.
Or how does all that work?
Yeah, so we actually consider the ISACs to be our partners, and several of them we have formal relationships with, and we actually meet regularly together to and we have also standard connections between the leadership and the analysts in those organizations so that we can keep abreast of what's going on. And so we generally see ourselves as kind of partners in this effort to to make the ecosystem safer overall. And we very much view it as it's a collaborative effort among the different sharing organizations to make those improvements.
So I would be remiss in not asking you about the role of artificial intelligence, given what we're seeing of late. What's your assessment on how AI fits into the cybersecurity ecosystem, and even more granularly about sharing?
So I think that I have long thought that artificial intelligence is going to be ultimately a wash, meaning that both it will be used for adversarial purposes, right? So you can use things like ChatGPT to craft better phishing emails, right? That overcome the language barriers, right? That sound more natural. But at the same time, the good guys will also use artificial intelligence to detect patterns faster, to uncover and make predictions about what the next iteration of an algorithm might be that the bad guys are using. And so I think ultimately it will be put to use by both the adversaries and by the defenders. And ultimately will probably more or less sort of even out in terms of its effect on the overall balance of things. Now, at any given point, one of those might be outweighing the other.
Right.
But I think I don't think any advantage that it conveys will be, will be permanent or long term. on either side, because I think both sides will make adaptations to incorporate artificial intelligence into what they're doing.
Wow, that's an incredibly astute analysis, and makes sense to me. I was doing an interview recently with a company in Israel, and the topic came up because this company is more along the red team sort of view, and and I asked about that, and he basically is echoing what you're saying. And to me, it makes sense for the reasons that you're saying. And I very much like that you said there'll be times where things are out of balance. So speaking of this notion, of balance in threat intelligence and the cybersecurity ecosystem, what is your idea of the impact with the recent kind of issues facing the technology ecosystem, SVB Bank, things like that? How do you assess things at the moment?
So clearly, if you are a startup cybersecurity company, life's pretty tough, right? That a lot of the venture capital had actually been pulling back some, even before SVB and the problems that happened there. But particularly now, after SVB's collapse, that has really made people skittish. Clearly, you see the layoffs that are happening at some of the big technology companies, and that is a sign of some of the troubles in the industry. But interestingly enough, I think that is counterbalanced by some things. One of which is that if anything, cybersecurity requirements are going to be increasing. If you look at like the National Cybersecurity Strategy that just came out of the beginning of March 2023, the administration is clearly signaling that they want to have additional cybersecurity regulations on critical infrastructure companies. And so, and this is true in many jurisdictions around the world, not just the United States. And so what this means to me is that companies are not going to be able to really sort of ratchet back their cybersecurity spending dramatically, even if they're facing some economic pressures. That instead, they're going to have to continue investing in cybersecurity. Now, they may try to rationalize some of their spending. They will try to squeeze their spending. But I don't think you're going to see a massive retrenchment of people just saying, oh, that cybersecurity is one of those nice to have sort of thing. Like nobody's going to be in that position. So what that means is that I think for the more established companies, they'll be able to withstand the current turbulent times. I do think we'll see some additional consolidation and acquisitions in the cybersecurity market, which honestly may not be such a bad thing because there are thousands of cybersecurity companies. And I think one of the challenges that a chief information security officer, most chief information security officers would tell you is, how on earth do I select among all of these different, products and tools? And how do I really know that they actually work? And what does product A sort of is over here? And how does that relate to product B? And I've already got product C in my stack. And it's a very complicated environment. And I think slimming that down some may not be such a bad thing for the ecosystem overall.
That's a very astute observation as well. So I wonder, how does CTA sort of fit into the information ecosystem? Is one of the benefits of membership that the folks get information, better information more quickly, more usable? Does it integrate into this capital stack in some innovative ways? Maybe you can help our audience understand some of the benefits of CTA.
Yeah, so I mean, part of it at the fundamental level rests on the idea that no single entity in the ecosystem sees everything malicious across the entire ecosystem, right? Not even NSA in the US government, despite what people think, right? So no one sees everything. And so as a result, data the underlying data is not really the comparative advantage for most cybersecurity companies. Their comparative advantage, their competitive edge comes from what they do with data, how they analyze it, how they set up the protections, what conclusions they draw, the advice they give. And so if you have more information and you have better information because it's been curated, because it's been vetted, because it's got context attached to it, which is one of the other requirements that we have for CTA, then you're going to be better at your whatever it is that you do, right? Your products and services will be more effective because you have access to better data, you have access to more data, and it will actually make you more competitive. And so my argument is that by sharing and raising that kind of baseline level of information across the ecosystem, it makes all of our member companies more competitive. And if they're more competitive, that's a benefit for the consumer. That's a benefit for the user at the end because you're getting a better product or service as a result. And so that's how CTA really sees itself as this force multiplier for the cybersecurity industry. If you're a cybersecurity company, the other benefit that you get, right, is you get you get access to net new information. You also get access to a trusted community that you can interact with at a human level. And we have a lot of protections built in, so that if you are sharing and working through the CTA umbrella, if you will, you have a lot of ability to share and interact and work together in a way that is not an antitrust concern, for example. So we provide a lot of those benefits as well. So really, the idea behind CTA is kind of that force multiplier concept of enabling all of our members to be more effective at what they do.
You know, as we're wrapping up, you had mentioned one of the member companies, Dragos. Rob Lee, the CEO, recently testified in front of Congress. Maybe a year prior, it was uncovered that there was this really unfortunate game changer in the area of operational technology, cybersecurity. The name slips me at the moment. It might have been like Sandworm or something like that. Do you know what I'm referring to? I might be mangling this a little bit.
Are you talking about Pipedream?
Yes, Pipedream. That's it.
Yes. Yes. And so a lot of so for many of the operational technologies, the industrial control systems and other things like that, SCADA systems, they're highly specialized, and there has not been as much commonality among those systems. And so if you've met, one Siemens Electric, OT system, you've met one Siemens Electric OT system, right? It's there wasn't a lot of extensibility. And what that meant was that when you wrote malware for those kinds of systems, you had to customize it very carefully for each system. Well, the milestone that we hit last fall was that somebody has figured out a way to write some malware that targets OT systems that is more like a Swiss Army knife, that you can use the same malware to target multiple manufacturers. So not just Siemens, but also GE or Schlumberger or any of the other sort of, I don't think it's not infinite, right? But it would enable you to target multiple kinds of manufacturers at the same time. And that's a big deal because it lowers the cost, if you will, for carrying out operations against OT systems. So that's not a great advance from the good guys' perspective. That was not something that we wanted to see. Many of us have been expecting it for some time, but it was unfortunate to see that it had arrived. But that's really the core of that change, and that's actually that's a pretty significant development in the adversarial toolbox.
And so you have a lot of operational technology, threat intelligence as well, or do you?
So we have some. Yeah, we have some that are, that's their focus, and it's certainly one of the, one of the things that we always note is a lot of these groups don't necessarily, you were talking about their horizontal integration earlier, Gary, like a lot of these groups don't restrict themselves to just, one type of IT system or one
Right.
type of company or other things. And so from our perspective, CTA can't restrict itself to just, endpoint providers or, network companies or whatever. We have to be very diverse in our membership to reflect the fact that, the bad guys tend to have a wide diversity of targets as well.
You, last thing I'll ask you about is you want to share with our audience any upcoming events or things you'd like to let them know about, or how they can learn more about CTA?
Well, certainly you can always go to our website, cyberthreatalliance.org, and check out what's available on our resources page or on our assets page. You can always reach out to us, at info@cybersecurityalliance.org. We do have a Twitter, and Twitter handle and LinkedIn pages as well, so you can find us under those names and track what we're doing. We try to promote a lot of what our members are working on, so you'll find a lot of material related to our members and the research and analytics that they're doing. I think coming up, there are a number of things that we will be involved in, but one of the biggest will be, we are running the Threat Intelligence Practitioners Summit track at Virus Bulletin conference in the fall, and so we will be. The call for papers is already out for that. And so we're looking for some really good papers and research that could be, on that threat intelligence line of work that for that conference it'll be in London in early October. So that's one of the things that's coming up.
Indeed. Well, on behalf of a grateful digital universe, thanks, Michael, for who you are and what you do, and most importantly, why you do it. Keep up the great work.
Well, thanks, Gary, and thank you for doing this show and all the work that you do in this space. But thank you for having me.
Have a great day.
Thank you.